Hey, ladies and gents, look at this. Look, I'm, I'm in a space module. I'm in the May, that's flying about up in space that the Americans use, and it's Russian. Would you believe it's Russian? And they're trying to cause a proxy war with them. It's incredible, isn't it? But can we go up to the May, the space station there? So anyway, this is the kind of hypocrisy that we're living in today, unfortunately. But anyway, I've got a great guest on tonight. I've got my usual guest as well, Anthony, the international artist. So I've got him on, but I've got a great guest on tonight, and I'll still be doing the Florence Maybrick murder trial. I'll still be doing that, and I want your comments afterwards after I do it, simply because I'm not going to tell you. I'm not going to tell you. But I want your comments later because I'll be asking a question. I'll be asking a great question. But anyway, I'm going to bring my special guest on. This fella, Gerard Gilligan, he's an astronomer. And I'd love him to stay when I'm, doing this particular murder trial. Because I'd like his opinion. If he stays with us, that is, because I know he's a very, very busy person. I know that for a fact. I had Gerard on ages and ages ago, a few years ago now, and it was the time when we sent a probe out. Well, when I say we, a probe went up to land on a comet. And I'm going to talk about that because I've forgotten about it. It went millions and millions of miles, travelled years. So you can imagine the technology. It travelled for years to land on this comet. So I'm going to ask him about it to, remind me, have a recap on it. But anyway, I just hope that you stay with me and stay with Gerard. Because he's a fascinating man. He's an astronomer, a proper astronomer. It's funny, because when I first introduced him, I'm going back years ago, I said, yeah, there's an astrologist on. What kind of Jason got through me? He said he's an astronomer. He's not an astrologist. Oh, yeah, okay. So anyway, I'm going to bring him right on, and there he is. He's a very special guest, very a good man. And just listen to what this fella has to say. Good evening, Gerard.
Hello. Hi, Frank. Good. Nice to see you again after all this time.
Oh, yeah. It's been a very long time.
Straight away, I've got to correct you about something.
Oh, right, okay.
You're not on Mir. You're not on Mir. You're on the International Space Station.
Oh, right, okay. The International Space Station.
Yeah, the Russian space station Mir. Mir stands for peace. Unfortunately, that's burnt up and come back. So, but you're on the International Space Station, and you look very well by it as well. So, okay.
Was I making God's astronaut?
You do indeed. I'm jealous.
But it says, can you tell us a bit about this International Space Station? Can you fill us in a little about it?
Well, it's been up, I think about 25 years now in Earth orbit. It was built primarily by the Russians and the Americans, bit by bit. The Americans brought up parts of the space station via the space shuttle, and it's an international venture now. It's not just Russia and America. It's all European countries. There's a lot of Arabian countries involved. Wow. Japan. We've had a British astronaut on the space station, Tim Peake. He was on board for 6 months. Yeah, if you remember. It's doing a lot of research, biological research, It's doing research into long duration flights by humans, and it's essential that because, of course, if man and women want to travel to the outer planets, you're going to be in space for a long time. A typical mission to Mars will probably be 3 to 4 years long.
I'm going to come back to that, if I might. I'm going to come back to that because I was watching something yesterday, and I went, wow, I didn't realise what I'll tell you about in a moment. But I just want to say hello to the people out there, if you don't mind, Gerard.
Yeah, sure.
These have been waiting. I've got my nephew on as well, believe it or not. Anyway, Mark Kinnish says, evening, Frank, hope you're doing okay. Have you heard of a person called George Francis Train? He was to do with the trams. Yes, I have. But anyway, and he goes on to say, love your space deal, Frank. To Jason build that for you. Yeah, he did. To Jason build that for you. And JK, you never walk alone. Breast bro, Frank, thank you. Thank you, JK. Good to see you. And as Mark says, looking forward to that, Frank. That's you, that's Gerard. Looking forward to all this. And good day, Frank, says Gary Rigby. And he is. I am here as promised, Uncle. Good vibes. Thank you, Thomas. Thank you. Speaking to him today. Evening, Gerard, says Mark Kinnish.
Hello, Mark.
Thomas again says, lost in space, Frank? Yes. Yes, I am. But this man is going to bring me right down to earth when I start speaking to him. This is fantastic. Welcome to Frank's world, says Redbird. Really, absolutely brilliant. Right, and JK says, evening, Gerard, you'll never walk alone. How about that? So there's people, they're all there. Here's what I watched yesterday, and it surprised me. Right? Going back to the late 60s and the early 70s, I didn't know this. Now, I'm looking at this thing, and pictures and everything. It was fantastic. I didn't realise that the Russians got to Mars and Venus first before any Americans got there. Could you tell me a little bit about that? Something.
Well, the missions that they've been exploring Venus and Mars for a long time, about the same time as the Americans. The missions to Mars have not been as successful as to Venus, but the outstanding Venus mission I can tell you about is Vena 13. I think in the early 1970s, that actually landed the probe on Venus. And Venus is a very hostile world. It's volcanic, it's very hot. The surface temperatures are extremely intense, and I think it even rains sulfuric acid. And it was even then, and even now, it's a piece of magnificent endeavor and technology by the Russians. And I think the probe that landed on the surface worked for about 13 seconds, but it managed to take a photograph of the surface. Going back to their missions to Mars, they've not been as successful getting to Mars as the Americans. For some reason, their probes have got to orbit Mars, but have unfortunately stopped working. So if you compare their ability to get to Mars and Venus, I think Venus is the successful catalogue of missions that they've had.
It's surprising, isn't it? Because when I was watching that, and you're right about the soft landing, and I seen pictures of the surface, and the pressure as well. It's no good for man.
Yeah.
Whether in the future, whether I'm talking about years and years to come. Maybe in a couple of 100 years, I don't know. I'm not all that clued up about space travel, but maybe, just maybe, that man can get to Venus and, explore it more, than what we've seen back in the early 70s. What do you think?
Well, it's funny you should actually say that, because one of the missions that NASA actually did look into, just for a brief period, to utilize all the leftover Saturn V's and technology and hardware from the some of the moon missions, was to actually propose to do an orbital flight, a manned orbital flight to Venus. They would go into orbit around Venus, study the planet, and then come back to Earth. But it was, at the time, decided it was a bit too ambitious. So they decided to concentrate on doing Earth orbital research, which was Skylab. And then following Skylab was an American-Russian endeavor where a Soyuz and an Apollo docked together, and then the space shuttle came along. So they did meddle a little bit in planning to go to Venus in a manned mission, but it never came about.
Well, do you know, Redbird's asked you a question. Gerard, is it true there's no time in space?
I don't think that's true. You can still have chronometers to record time when you're in space. When you're in Earth orbit, you see sunsets, I think, about 19 times during a normal time period, a day period, if you were on Earth. But that's because you're orbiting the Earth. But I think time is measured in space, yes.
Okay. I'm going to bring in the international artist, a good friend of mine. And here he is. It's Anthony Brown. He's my regular. Here he is. Hiya, Anthony.
Good evening. Good evening, Frank. Sorry, I struggled to get on then, but I caught the past few minutes of your conversation with Gerard. Fascinating. But yeah,
good evening, and good evening, Anthony. Nice to meet you.
And you too, Gerard. Thank you.
So isn't this great? Is it? I want to ask you, Gerard, because I told loads of people this. I told them loads, what I was saying about this comet, being built. And I'll never forget what you said to me at there, because I said, wasn't that fantastic technology to send that up? And you said, could you imagine the technology today? So going back then, it was fantastic technology. Do you remember, Gerard, about that space probe landing on a comet?
Yeah, I can't remember it was a European mission that I think took about 14 years altogether. It had to do a certain pathway to get to the comet and loop into orbit, so that it in a way sort of spiraled down to the comet to get very close, and then it released a little landing probe, if you remember, which they unfortunately it didn't land properly, but they managed to get some detailed images and information back about how comets react with the sun as they get closer within our solar system. And of course, comets are sort of a record of how the solar system was constructed and built and formed. So they are a sort of historical document, you could say, about how the solar system came about.
Yeah, it's strange though, isn't it? Because when, we just sit back. I'm not saying you sit back because you're into all this and, you work at it and whatever. The likes of myself, and when we watch these like probes or whatever going up into space, and as you mentioned, about the likes of what the Russians did, and it was great technology then going back to the early 70s, getting onto the likes of Venus. And then I heard you mentioning about Mars, because what the mayor, which I'm sitting in here now, and Anthony's jealous of the mayor because I'm actually sitting in it. And not the mayor, the
International Space Station.
International Space Station. Anyway, do you really reckon, I mean this, do you reckon that the will, or there's two questions, well, one question rolled into one. I'm being a little bit facetious now. Do you reckon that there will be space stations on the moon, and also space stations on Mars as well in the future?
Oh, I think there will be. We've lagged a little bit behind in our original plans, because the moon landings were absolutely a technological wonder, and they still are. But we haven't been, we haven't put men or women back on the moon for 50 years, over 50 years now. So we're lagging a bit behind. If we'd stayed to the original plan, I think, in the emphasis in exploring the solar system, even now we would have probably had some kind of primitive moon base and then a Mars base. But you're looking perhaps into the 2040s and 50s before we get out into Mars. But as I've indicated to you before, it can take 3 days to get to the moon, which is, in today's technology, is not too beyond our expertise, so to speak. But to get to the Mars, that's a completely different matter. You've got to take all your water and your food initially there. You'll have to spend at least 3 to 4 years in space. And once you get to Mars, if you go into orbit or even land on Mars, you're going to have to wait for the Earth and Mars to get closer together again in their orbits, so that you've got a shorter distance to get back. So that's a lot of complication involved, but it is possible, and I'm sure beyond my lifetime anyway that it will happen.
Okay, well, I'll just go on to a couple of questions here. And Redbird says, was it a space anomaly? I suppose that made you late, haven't you?
kind of technology. Yeah. I mean, we've waited since 1969, I guess, for something major to happen, and my link didn't work, so I can't compare the two. But
I'm going to ask you, I'll be asking Gerard a couple of questions about Voyager in 1974, actually, and where it is now. Thomas Owens says, when you were talking, when the Redbird said, is there any sounds in space? Thomas Owens says, time is a matter of perspective, surely. Time is a matter of perspective, surely.
Oh yes, yeah, I agree. And in many ways, that's why even the astronauts on the space station, like what you're on at the moment, Frank, they work to a normal 24-hour system. However, if they look out the window, they're going to see a sunset and a sunrise every few minutes because of the way they go around the Earth. They're seeing night and day very, very quickly. However, they're still working to, say, an 8-hour working day and an 8-hour or plus sleeping time recreation. So they try and keep to an Earth-type time period, even though they're in space, and things they're reacting differently to a time perspective. So I agree with your questioner. Yes.
Okay, that's great. So that's your question answered there, Thomas. Also, what about the inside the likes of here, for example? We've got to have some sort of gravity. You know, like what you see in films, you know, these science fiction films where they're just walking about instead of floating about. Well, have you heard if they're working on this?
Yeah.
They are working on it. Do you think it'll succeed, by the way?
Well,
you know,
there's there's two things to tell you about. The Russians have already sent up a film director and an actress to the International Space Station to do a film, which I think will be either has already been released or will be. So they've done that, but the Russians pay for that themselves to do it. You may have heard that the actor Tom Cruise is proposing that he trains for a mission and he pays for his ticket, but he goes to the International Space Station and he does some film sequences over, say, a week period. But it needs permission from NASA because, of course, they don't want the normal production of what the astronauts on the space station are doing disrupted in any way. But the tickets will be paid for independently. No taxpayers' money will be spent. But and of course, today's film sorry.
Go on.
Today's film technology can make it look as if you're floating in space. But if I can remind you about the movie Apollo 13, some of the sequences, they actually built the inside of a command module inside what's called a vomit comet, the plane that simulates zero gravity, the way it flies. Well, actually, they were able to film some sequences of the astronauts as if they were weightless in space, but they were on this plane that simulates zero gravity just for a few periods, the way it's able to fly and come back down. It simulates zero gravity just for short periods.
Yeah, it must have cost millions because just to get
the film
must have cost millions.
Well, any wires used that can easily be taken out by technology. To answer your question, Frank, yeah, it's easily done now these days.
Okay. Yeah, as I said, Redbird says time is a man-made concept, and Redbird says, Gerard, do you know you're upsetting the flat earthers? Thomas Owen says, yeah, moon base, yeah, definitely. That'll be on it. Let me just go through there, and I'm going to bring in Anthony in a moment.
Okay.
Mark says there could be sounds in space. It could be David Bowie singing "Life on Mars."
That'd be great.
Mark Simons, isn't it strange how all the original archival footage and all the telemetry data of the moon landings at NASA were mysteriously lost? And what are we talking about? That's a crack. I'm going to ask you this. I'm going to ask you about that, actually. Strange but true. That's what Mark Simons says.
I'm afraid to answer that question, but
I don't answer it yet. Don't. Mark Kenny says, Gerard, do you think there is life on Mars or human activity? Don't answer that yet. And Arthur Schofield, evening, gents. Later arrived, but sounds as though I've arrived in time to get spaced out.
Evening, Arthur. Yeah. Deep breath.
I'm going to Anthony here. I'm going to Anthony. Anthony, you've been listening to what Gerard has been saying. What do you think about all this space thing? You know, going up there, and yeah, we had Neil Armstrong, didn't we? You know, landing on the moon first. You know, one leap for mankind and all this. What do you think of all the space? Space travel, and do you really think that there will be? I asked.
I think he will. I think he will. If you think that our entire lives, certainly throughout the 50s into the 60s, and then the moon landing, has been a projection of what is out there. I think it was the late 50s, early 60s when we had a wealth of science fiction movies and writings and stories and scenarios of what could be. So we, as mere mortals, listening and reading this stuff, were almost convinced. Then I remember somewhere in the back of me on the shelf is an encyclopedia my dad bought for me in 1969, and the most fascinating pages are a series of about 12 pages of moon and space shots before the landing, when we were allowed to get the photographs, which I presume would have been from satellites. And it was just mind-blowing to see that then as an 8-year-old, 7-year-old. It's still one of my favorite books. But so I think we've kind of grown up with that scenario that it will happen. It's only when. I was a little shocked when Gerard was talking before about obviously the time lapse between man landing and walking on the moon to now. It's like 60 years. And although we seem to have, in paper and on TV, we seem to have progressed a great deal more than that. We haven't really gauged how we would approach life on the moon or life on Mars, because we haven't spent enough time on there, I guess.
No. Can I go to Gerard? And it's what Mark said before. Mark Simons, that is. He says, isn't it strange how all the original archival footage and telemetry data of the moon landings at NASA were mysteriously lost? Strange but true.
I didn't know that, yeah.
No, I beg to differ. I'm afraid all the footage and telemetry still exists. They were all perfectly recorded. The NASA have a vast photographic archive, which has recently been published in a new book, because a lot of the original photographs have been using modern day technology, digital technology, have actually been enhanced. All the videos and film that they took using the technology at the time still exist, and they can easily be viewed on somewhere like YouTube and something like that. And no, the NASA has a lot of information that they still haven't examined. The moon rocks that they returned, apparently some of them have not even been touched since they came back from the moon, and that's 50, and as Anthony said, maybe 60 years ago. So all the data that they brought back, whether it be photographic or data of any kind, still exists and is still being studied today.
Wow. Gerard, would it have been, sorry, Frank, would it have been kind of an official secrets act with the actual people involved, certainly the astronauts, so that their story to us, if they were to put it in a book or work with a film crew, hypothetically, would they be allowed to tell us what really went on there, what the conditions were like?
Oh yeah, and it's already happened. Nearly, I would think all the astronauts that went either in orbit round the moon or landed on the moon have brought out some kind of book. Nearly, I'm sure all of them over the years have been interviewed. The Apollo 11 mission was celebrated during its 50th anniversary, and the surviving crew at the time, Buzz Aldrin and Mike Collins, they were extensively interviewed, and there was masses of documentaries brought out. So there was no kind of secret. It's all now clearly out in the open. A lot of the information has been released late on, but now it's because everybody involved are retired. They're no longer working for NASA because it's been so long ago since those events happened. I mean, I'm approaching my 64th birthday, but you have to imagine I was a 9-year-old schoolboy when Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin landed on the moon. So it is a long time ago, but as part of our history, it's just a real pinprick of time, really, if you think about what's happened.
What do you think the next? I'm sorry about this. What do you think the next big space thing is? What's going to happen, or is it all stopped in total?
No, I mean the International Space Station is still in orbit. That's going to be, I think, its mission is going to be extended for another 5 or perhaps another 10 years. The James Webb Telescope, which was launched about a year ago, that's going to produce a lot of information about our universe for 10 years. And that's in orbit around the sun. It's in a special orbit, so it's away from all the influences of the Earth. There's quite a number of probes being launched to explore our asteroids, which are the leftover rubble or bricks, you could say, of the solar system. And there are plans to send probes out to the outer planets again, Jupiter, Saturn, and there's even one being proposed to go into orbit around Uranus or even Neptune. But that mission will take approximately 30 years, all told, because of the amount of time it's going to take to go out to the outer parts of the solar system. And of course, one last thing is that next year they're planning to launch a crewed mission to the moon for the first time since Apollo, called Artemis 3. They won't land on the moon. They're going to go into orbit around the moon, and then they'll come back again. And then the mission afterwards, Artemis 4, hopefully will be a moon landing.
That's incredible, that, because it just stopped, didn't it? I think it's all because of the finance. It depends on, what these big companies want to deal with, whether it's, don't like saying this, I'm not bringing it into it, whether it's arms or, put all the money into this space race sort of thing. Anyway, can I ask you this final question?
Right.
I'd love you to stay because I've got to go on.
Yes, certainly.
Okay, final question.
No, you ask your question, Frank, please.
Okay. The 1974
yes, certainly.
Voyager, where is that now? And does it still send back any, information?
Yes, well, they were both, there was 2 probes. It was Voyager 1 and 2. They were called the Grand Tour missions. They were unmanned. They were launched in 1977. August and September 19 is heading towards the constellation of Leo. But Voyager 2, which was the mission that did the tour, it went past Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune, and then carried on to the outer. They are still transmitting just about. If you sent a radio signal out to Voyager 2, it would take, I believe, about 30 hours for the signal to get to the spacecraft, and then the return message back to Earth would take about 30 hours. And the radio signal is traveling about the speed of light, very, very quickly. So that gives you an idea of the distance that Voyager 2 is at now. It's gone beyond the influence of our sun through a heliosphere, it's called. It's gone beyond that. And it's heading out to the depths of the universe now. Probably well beyond the orbit of the dwarf planet Pluto. So that's where they are, Frank, to answer your question.
Why is it, that's a good one as well. You know, the final one, I'm sorry. Why is Pluto called a dwarf? Because it was just a planet, wasn't it? Then all of a sudden it became a dwarf planet.
Yeah, I personally disagree, because I was brought up with 9 planets in our solar system, which included Pluto. But because Pluto has been now measured at a certain size, it doesn't conform to the size of a planet. It's they called it a dwarf planet, so it's sort of been kicked out. But a group of astronomers in the International Astronomical Union, which govern what is called in the solar system, etc., they voted on kicking Pluto out because of this new evidence that it was not a proper planet.
That's shocking, that, isn't it, really? Because as you said, you grew up with it, I grew up with it, Anthony grew up, you know, with the 9 planets, and Pluto was one of them. And who makes these decisions anyway to say, no, this is a dwarf? Who is it? So someone just sits at a desk and goes, let's call it a dwarf planet.
It's a group of astronomers and scientists belonging to the International Astronomical Union. For example, if you discover a comet and no one else has seen it, and you make sure that it is plotted and it's checked and everything else in the sky, and someone else may find it just a few hours after you, then it's named after you and the second person. So it could be Gilligan Jones, for example, or even Gilligan Brown, for example. But that it's named after you because you're the first people to see this comet that nobody else has seen before. So they give the final sort of decision to name it after you.
Well, years ago when I was a young man, you know, going out Friday nights and Saturday nights, I seen a few comets, to be honest.
Right.
Especially
it might have been between a few scoops, but probably well after the person who first seen it.
Absolutely, you know. This is the very last one. And what's your comment? I'm going to ask Anthony what his comment is on this. Right. And it's from Mark Simons. And he says, when Hollands opened the container of the moon rock from Apollo, in brackets, gifted by the crew on a visit, under a microscopic analysis, the rock was found to be petrified wood. Strange, but true. What's your thing on that, Anthony? Petrified wood?
Me, I, other than the fascination with everything that we're talking about. Certainly that Gerard is making sense for us. But I find it amazing that even after all this time, we kind of still know equally. There's still so much to know about all the stuff that we do know, and it's like what you're saying about it. Is it possible to live on the moon? Is this, and this will take this is 4 or 5 generations after we're gone that this will come out. But maybe throughout our lives, it's been the first step in understanding what's out there. It's
absolutely. And Gerard's well, when Holland's opened that petrified wood, that's what he says. But
how and why
about
that? Again, I've not really heard about this, but there's no evidence that there's been any petrified wood on the moon. The moon's a pretty dead world. It's got no atmosphere. Wood would not be able to live without an atmosphere on the moon, so I don't think wood would be able to survive on the moon. Everything is as it was millions of years ago because there's no wind or rain, there's no weather on the moon to wash anything away. The footprints left by Neil Armstrong are there still today. They haven't been disturbed in any way. I think it's the conditions on the moon don't allow for wood to survive. So my comment would be that perhaps someone stole the moon rock and replaced it with petrified wood.
There's something there. That's a little bit mysterious, isn't it? Or connivance, put it that way, a little bit of connivance, to get people talking.
Where's the value?
Yeah. Well, listen, I've just got to talk about my sponsors a minute, and it's Gap Painting Services that sponsor the Frank Carlyle Show.
Yeah, sure.
And it's absolutely, these are lads are absolutely brilliant. They really are. They go in, if you're at OAP, you get a fantastic discount. And if you're an NHS worker, another fantastic discount. So if you need something done for Christmas right now, and you want it done right away, just get hold of Gap Painting Services. And we put the phone number and everything else, to contact these people. And as I said, if you're at OAP, get them in. They're brilliant. They're fully insured. They're fully time served. They're all good lads. And they just do it quickly. And a great job they do as well. And if you're an NHS worker, a great discount. Because I know how hard you work, you NHS people. Not only that, but if you need something done, Gap Painting Services, and there it is there. Clean and reliable NHS and OAP discounts. There you have it. And it's 07986 286357. And we put it up at the end of the show as well, if you're considering, even if you've got, relatives who are OAPs or NHS workers, get them in, because they do a fantastic job, as I said. And that's Gap Painting Services, the sponsors of the Frank Carlyle Show. And I'm going to go to Gerard. Whether he stays with us, I don't know. It'd be great if he can, because I'm actually going to do, Gerard, Florence Maybrick's murder trial that happened in 1889, I'm sorry.
Okay, Frank.
1889. Yeah. And, if you'd like to stay, because it's intriguing. I did Jack the Ripper last week. And, there's always something about Jack the Ripper. There are always something. and I've studied it. I studied it for many, many years. And what I said when I finished, why haven't they came out and said who it was? And I said simply, because the economy relies on the likes of, believe it or not, books, documentaries, everything, films about Jack the Ripper. And if they came out and said, well, it was Anthony Brown who's Jack the Ripper, that would be the end of it, because everybody know that Anthony Brown is Jack the Ripper. They'd be not made. There'd be no books. Books are coming out now. Even documentaries are still coming out today, and it costs a lot of money. And it's a big boost for the economy. I do know that for a fact. It's also like the Titanic. Now, the Titanic, we all know what happened to the Titanic, but there's lots and lots of mysteries behind it as well, why the Titanic went down. It's not just a straightforward hitting an iceberg and just sinking. There's more to it than that. And that's why, again, they won't come out with the whole of the truth. How long has it taken the likes of JFK assassination, for example? They're still doing these documentaries, they're doing films, there's books, there's everything on it. Again, it's good for the economy. So no matter what disasters happen, I tell you, one of the most, and it applies to what your profession, actually, Gerard, what never really goes on, and it is about deaths, unfortunately. It's one of the space shuttles, disasters, when I think it was 7 astronauts were killed, including a woman teacher. That's like more or less, we all know what happened because we've seen it live on the TV. We've seen it. But yet, they don't do anything about it. They try to push it in the background because it was a terrible disaster. And that's what I mean. But the likes of mysteries, the likes of the Titanic, the likes of Jack the Ripper, and these things, have a lot to do with their economies, both economies, the likes of the American economy and the likes of our own economy, especially with Jack the Ripper. I don't know did you hear that thing then? I think someone's trying to get hold of me. But anyway, Gerard, I hope you stay. If not, it's big. Will you come on again, please?
Well, I'm booked to come on again, Frank. So don't worry, I'll be back again.
Excellent stuff.
No problem.
Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. Because there's so much I really need to know about.
Okay.
Oh, it's Hubble's birthday, isn't it, today or something?
Whose birthday? Hubble. Sorry.
Hubble's. Hubble.
Hubble was launched into space in April of 1991, I think. So it's coming up to the James Webb. James Webb was launched on Christmas Day. Last year.
Because what it is, it's Edwin Hubble's birthday today.
Edwin Hubble's birthday. Sorry, I'm sorry. I thought you meant the telescope itself. No, the telescope that's. You looked at the found out about the fact that the expanding universe and red shifts and blue shifts of galaxies. Yes, he was an extraordinary an astronomer.
Well, the Hubble, when it first came out, you've seen the pictures, you personally, Gerard, did it excite you? Because it excited me.
Well, it did, but if you remember, Frank, unfortunately, the mirror had a mistake that had to be corrected. So the images weren't as they hoped they would be. So they had to send up a space shuttle mission and the astronauts did the repair and corrected the optics. they basically put a contact lens over the mirror. I mean, that's a simplified way of describing it, but that's basically what they did, and the images that came back were as you get them today.
That's fantastic.
So, yeah, it was a bit of a, yeah. Again, that was a tremendous feat of engineering to do that, to repair something like a space telescope in space using a space shuttle. They were able to do it.
See, they're the type of things that I'd like to talk about when you come on again. And as Mark Kinney says, please do come back, Gerard. Really enjoyed that. Isn't that nice? So, you know, you're a big fan there. I think you've got loads as well, because
I'd love to, Frank. Thanks. It's been really
excellent
great
stuff. Thank you so much. Well, I've got to open up. I've got to do a preamble now about Florence Maybrick. Florence Maybrick. Florence Maybrick. I just read a comment there, but I've got to get onto this. Florence Maybrick. She was accused of the murder of her husband, James Maybrick. Yes, he was known for one of the chief suspects of being Jack the Ripper. Now, when you think about this, you've got to think about Florence. Now, Florence was an 18-year-old girl, and she was with her parents on board ship. And this is where she met 42-year-old James Maybrick. Now, James Maybrick was a very, very wealthy man. Very wealthy. When you come to think about money, even today, money, they call it the root of all evil, but to some, money is everything. Me, on a personal basis, money doesn't bother me. It's never bothered me, in all honesty. You can ask my daughter that. Money doesn't bother me. But to some people, it's everything. And then the greed and everything else. Now, this young girl, pretty young girl, is 18 years of age, 18. They're on board the ship. She meets James Maybrick. As I said, he's a wealthy black man. He's a cotton merchant. And very, very wealthy. Very, very wealthy. And she meets him. And there you have it. There you have the meeting. 18, don't forget. 18 years of age. And then she gets permission of her parents. Oh, because they come from a privileged background. They come from a privileged background. So what had happened was, they gave her permission, this 18-year-old girl, to marry a much older man. And I know that some people say, well, it's only numbers. But when you go back to the 19th century, money was everything. Believe you me, as a historian, it was hand-to-mouth in those days, but she was privileged. She was a very privileged young lady, and she could go on cruises on her own anyway, so she was allowed to do all this. So therefore, to marry into wealth was good. If, for example, I was a metal on board, and this is me the way I am, do you think that she would have had permission to marry me? You know, if I was a lot younger, put it that way. I don't think so. But money brings in more prestige to families. That's why you have a lot of families marrying into money. You know, they've got money, but they marry into money because they don't want to lose their money. It's as simple as that. So marriages, some form of marriages are based on greed of whatever or whoever. And I'll go on more about this a little bit later, because it's very important where money comes into the equation of Florence Maybrick. and even their parents. Not only that, but you also see the influence of the American government. The American government, who hold everything over the country, to be honest, over the country. I'll give you a comparison from what it was like then to what it's like now. And in other words, there's no comparison when I explain about what happened. And I hope you stay with me because I'm going to have a little break now, because we have a clip, we show a clip every time of the Frank Carlyle Show, a little history clip. It's not about Florence or James, it's about whatever it is. So just sit back and enjoy this little clip.
In the 19th century, Liverpool had the vision that was the envy of the world. Many firsts were copied, and the overhead railway was no exception. In 1888, an improved plan by businessmen who formed Liverpool Overhead Railway Company had given the go-ahead. Sir Douglas Fox and James Greathead were commissioned to design an elevated railway. After long last, it was finally accepted and the work commenced in 1889. There were problems at first. Fox and Greathead had a dilemma. What was the safest power to use? They considered steam too dangerous because of the many flammable cargoes within the range of the train's sparks that could easily ignite these dangerous cargoes, causing a major catastrophe to shipping and the public. The only other option to pursue in 1891 was the new electric traction. Electricity was carefully chosen because of the enormous advantages: economy, speed, cleanliness and quiet running. Work was completed in January 1893 and finally opened on February the 4th by the Marquess of Salisbury. The public transport section did not have long to wait. It commenced on the 6th of March 1893. The world's first electric railway had automatic electric signals and a line from Herculaneum Dock to Seaford Carriage Shed. It had 11 stations at the beginning: Brocklebank, Canada, Sandon, Clarence, Princes, Pierhead, James Street, Custom House, Wapping, Brunswick and Toxteth. An electric escalator, the first of its kind, the Reno staircase, was installed at Seaford Sands in 1901. It was removed in 1906 because there were too many insurance claims by passengers against the railway. Clothing, especially women's long outfits, were continually getting caught and people falling over themselves as it moved and stopping suddenly. During the 1941 May Blitz, parts of the overhead railway were bombed and quickly repaired. However, the Second World War, through wear and tear and the bombing, deck plate supports for sections of the track were needed to be replaced, but at a costly price of £2 million. The company who ran the railway could not afford the price, and they proceeded to ask the council and the Mersey Docks and Harbour Board for help. They were refused, and with no help forthcoming, the rigorous public protest, the overhead railway, the first of its kind anywhere in the world, closed. The last train ran on December the 30th, 1956. There were many protests and attempts to save the overhead railway. Unfortunately, the protests fell on deaf ears. The only decision made by the people in power was to demolish it, and demolish it they did, leaving an enormous void in Liverpool's great heritage. There are few remnants left of the old overhead railway, and this one at Brunswick Dock. you can see the stairwell leading up to the station itself. And up here, we have a tunnel that led to Dingle, because engineers had to bore through sheer sandstone for half a mile of tunnel to get to Dingle in an extraordinary feat of the 19th century. The Liverpool Overhead Railway, which is much missed, is a real Liverpool unequalled.
Here, during the new construction down at the Albert Dock, what you can actually see behind me is a building, the new Park 1 West building, that's shaped like the bow of a ship, and it just coincides with the Albert Dock, which was the very first enclosed dock in the entire world, built in 1846 by Jesse Hartley. It's absolutely wonderful, and it's grade 1 listed. Why it was cutting edge at the time in 1846, before the Albert Dock was built, there was lots and lots of pilfery going on. Goods were going, businessmen, merchants were getting absolutely fed up. And Jesse Hartley, the dock's engineer, came up with a brainchild to build an enclosed dock. And this is what you see today, the very first enclosed dock system in the entire world. And it opens in 1846 by Queen Victoria's husband, Prince Albert, hence the name Albert Dock. As you can see, people are just sitting down on a lovely day drinking coffee. But if you go back to the 1850s, the actual coffee beans in big sacks were being unloaded by the dockers. But unfortunately, there's no more dockers now. But they've been replaced by the tourists sitting down drinking the coffee. So therefore, it's come in a big full circle. Besides the coffee, what was coming into Liverpool, into the Albert Dock, was sugar, cotton, exotic fruits, spices from all around the world. And yet, Jesse Hartley said, we cannot afford for these to be pilfered. And he built the dock. And there was only one way in with the ships and one way out. No pilfering. And that's why the rest of the world copied this magnificent building. During the decline of the dock system, this became no exception, the Albert Dock, because it just went and fell into dereliction. And the dock itself, the water side of it, just silted up. And it wasn't until 1983 and the foresight of Michael Heseltine, the Minister of Merseyside, then he foreseen a great future for this dock. And today, modern times, it's become one of Liverpool's jewels in the crown for tourism. There you have it. There you have it. The Albert Dock. The Albert Dock. The overhead railway. Two fantastic things. One's gone, and we've still got one, thank God, because I was always wondering when Heseltine came up, imagine, Anthony, if we just still had the overhead railway. I wonder if he would have said, don't knock that down.
Probably would have, Frank. I mean, I never got to see it in its actual glory, but my uncles, my granddad were dockers. My dad, my mum grew up with that, and
they must have travelled on it. They must have travelled on it, haven't they? He must have travelled on the Albert Dock.
Yeah,
The overhead.
certainly. Yeah, I mean, when the great exodus in town came in the mid-50s, my granddad and the family with my mum and stuff were moved to Kirby, and then we know many people were moved out to Garston, where it travelled from, So there's all of that. Again, it's. I think the world would be a more glorious place if we didn't have town planners.
Yeah.
Or if we had town planners that were in tune with the mood and the people of the city.
Well, the thing is, as well, to me, it has only cost £2 million, to put right after the bombing, that is. And they were still running trains for 10 years. 13, 14 years after the war, there were still trains running on it. And they just said, we need new plates. It's going to cost about $2 million. And they said, no, get rid of it. Because councillors then, they were in the demolition business. So you just look at that and go, all right, pull it down there. Pull it down.
It's like when you travel a line back, and our generations, it's like from 1971, there was so much damage, more damage done from 1971 to now that both world wars did to the city, with leveling areas and deciding policy on strategy and what's going to be here and what's not. I mean, the one wonderful thing I got from your piece then, which is great, is that the whole transformation from the Albert Dock, from when it was a thriving, working dock and port, to what we know and enjoy today, because we watched that happen in our lifetime.
Yeah.
And I remember 1983, 84, when people were saying, they're going to open it, it's going to be restaurants and all sorts. And I think, nah, I can't.
And the dock on the river, which is absolutely amazing. It really is.
I'll tell you what enhanced that as well is more recent times, is when, and you too were within the people who were planning and designing Liverpool One, which I think, from my view, is that it opened up a path from central of town to the Albert Dock, so you could walk from Church Street Central Station to the Albert Dock in 10 minutes. So it opened up a lot of scope for so many businesses and so many lives, and Albert Dock is still the most beautifully solid structure that we've got.
It is. It's one of the most remarkable engineering feats. I was doing something for
What a vision that gentleman had.
I was doing something for 3 television people, 1 German and 2 Japanese, all in a matter of days, in 1 week. I showed them from a different perspective of the Albert Dock, looking over. Yeah. And I took around as well astrophysicists. Wow. And they just went, whoa, look at that, because I tried to explain how can you build, and these engineers as well, they even said, the German television and the both Japanese companies, they said, how could that be possible to build a structure like that? This is from the angle I showed them. And no one sees it. No one sees it. I think I'm the only one who brings, like, people say, yeah, look at that. How could they build such a complex structure in the middle of a river? Think about it.
How can you imagine it?
Exactly. And it's all in the mid-19th century. It's remarkable. But anyway, Anthony, I've got to go on about this Merseytrack. You don't mind. Don't mind. So Florence Maybrick married this man, and she comes and lives in Battlecrease in Egbert with him. They have children. Now, you've got to understand what was happening during the 19th century, the 18th century, the 17th century, even going back to the 16th century. Gentlemen, if you call them that, could have mistresses. They could have mistresses. And nothing was said, you know, turn a blind eye or whatever. That was the way it was. They even went with prostitutes. Nothing was said. Nothing was said as long as they kept the marriage going. Now, let's look at Florence. Now, Florence, when she came, as I said, money is everything. So when she was living there, she was a spendthrift. She was a spendthrift. She spent on lavish things. She really went to town on lavish things. Anyway, it wasn't so like a marriage of it was a marriage of convenience for her, put it that way. It was a marriage of convenience because of the wealth. Until one day, James Maybrick said, you've got to cut the spending out. You have to cut it out. So what he did, he dropped the allowance. He dropped it right down. But she was still spending because she knew that her mother, who was married, by the way, her original father had died, and she married a German Viscount. Well, he was a baron. So she became Baroness von Rock. That was her title. So she again privileged. And as I said, she gave permission for her daughter, 18-year-old daughter, to marry a 42-year-old man. But she knew that her parents will die one day. And this lavishness through a bank. Now, her original dad was a banker, put it that way. He was a banker. So it was a very privileged family she came from, where money was no object. Money was no object. And that's why the mother allowed her, Florence, to marry into money. It's as simple as that. It's as simple as that. So anyway, this lavishness carried on because she was borrowing on the likes of her jewellery, you know, through a bank, on her jewellery, and also on an estate that she will inherit back in America. Back in America, if her mother died, so she'll inherit her estate. So she was borrowing on that. But James went like, listen, you can't keep doing this. You can't keep doing this. Anyway, the children were being looked after. You know, they had the little household in Battlecrease, and you know, they had a woman like a nurse, you know, to look after the kids. And her name was Alice Yap. Her name was Alice Yap. So one day, Florence said to her, here, you know, post that letter for us. So she said, okay. So she took the perambulator out. That means a pram, you know, with the kids in it. She was walking, but it was raining. So she said, and the letter, which was in her hand, had dropped, supposedly, on the floor. Now, don't forget that this is ink times, you know, ink. And if you've ever written with ink and a little bit of water drops on it or whatever, it smudges. It smudges the ink. And it could ruin a word or words or whatever. It could just ruin the whole line. It depends how much water gets on it. So she picked it up, presumably. She picks it up, opens the letter, and reads it. to see if it was all right, if there was any words or any words missing or it was smudged in any way. So she folded it back and put it back in the envelope. Thing is, did she post it? Now that letter was to a fellow by the name of Albert Braley. Albert Braley. Now you might think he's from Yorkshire. He wasn't. He was an American, a young man. He was a young American. He was also here on business. So this letter was given to James. And he looked at it. So he found out now that Florence was having an affair. Was having an affair with a man. Now, going back in the day, the 19th century, it was a scandal for a woman, a privileged woman, living in a privileged life in a privileged household, to have an affair. It was deemed a big sin, in other words. Scandalous. But it was all right for the man, because it was the world had dominated by males. So therefore, this particular girl was deemed a charlatan, not a charlatan. She was deemed a woman of, shall we say, misrepute. So she was vilified as being the Scarlet Woman. I always remember a book written by Nathaniel Hawthorne called The Scarlet Letter, where a girl had an affair, and you're going back to the 17th century. She had an affair with this man, and she was ostracized by the whole of the community, and she had to walk around with a purple letter on her dress. It was the letter A, meaning adulteress. So everybody knew that this woman had committed adultery. And that's the way it was then, going back. So it's gone on for centuries. You shouldn't have an affair if you come from a privileged background. You shouldn't have an affair, or you'll be deemed a scarlet woman. It's as simple as that. A scarlet woman. And this is what Florence Maybrick was described as, a scarlet woman. Scandalous that she should have an affair with an American from her own country, a fellow countryman. So this is the way it was with Florence. So what has happened? He became infuriated. He was furious about it. He was furious about this. So he said, you can do it, I'll do it. But he already had mistresses anyway. So she knew that he was, there was a lot of infidelity going on. But she became also, she had a man. So the infidelity wasn't only with James Maybrick, but also his wife, Florence. So what had happened? She said, this is wrong. This is wrong. So she started ordering. Now let's get to James before we start about this ordering stuff. He was a drug addict. But going back then, it wasn't opium or anything. It was arsenic. And he always took arsenic. Only little sniffs of it. But he took these arsenic things, and, arsenic today, you get that, you're dead. But he always believed that it was a pick-me-up. And not only he took it, there was a lot of other people who would take arsenic for a pick-me-up.
Yeah.
And then she knew this, Florence. She knew it. She knew it. She knew what was happening with this arsenic. Also, She knew something about him. She knew something about him besides taking the arsenic, besides being a drug addict, because today he'd be known as a drug addict. But she also had something common, because you've got to ask yourself, well, why didn't he divorce her? He had the money to divorce her because it cost a lot of money in those days to divorce. Let's take, for example, Charles Dickens. Charles Dickens was away from his wife for years, but he couldn't afford to get divorced because it cost a hell of a lot of money. But James Maybrick, he could afford to get divorced. He could afford to get divorced. Getting back to Charles Dickens did have a mistress, by the way. But getting away from that now. So he knew if this divorce would happen, because he would have just got shut of it, that would have been, he could have just kept the kids, got rid of her, and that would have been the end of it. And you've got to ask, why? Why didn't he divorce his wife? To get rid of him once and for all, to get rid of him. So anyway, she knew that they weren't going to get divorced, but she was going to be enclosed in this house. All eyes were going to be on her, especially with this Albert Brearley. She used to meet him at race meetings, the likes of the Grand National, for example. That's where she used to go and meet him. So she had a plan. Did she have a plan? This is the main thing. Now, the plan was what she wanted. What she did, she went around shops, ordinary little chandlers. She went around and she was buying fly paper. Now, fly paper had arsenic on to kill the flies, obviously back in the day. But she was also buying rat poison, again to kill the rats, obviously, but that was arsenic as well. So if you think about it, what she was doing, she was buying this, but was it for the household? Was it to put these fly papers up on the ceiling, as you normally did in the day, to catch the flies? Or was it for something else? Because Alice Yap walked in one day into her room. Don't forget they were big rooms there. But walked into her bedroom. And what she said, she went to clean up. And what she seen was a bowl, and fly paper. And one fly paper was actually in the bowl, and there were segments on the bottom of the bowl, segments. And what it turns out is that the segments was the arsenic through the water was coming off the fly paper and into the bottom of the bowl. The bottom of the bowl. So these were all there. And she got a shock, actually, because she said, well, why is she doing this? Not only that, but she was going from shop to buy lots and lots of fly paper. So why do that?
Wow.
Well, servants, they do that. They go out and do the shopping for fly paper and ended up. Well, Florence was going around buying loads of fly paper with arsenic on. Not only that, but also rat poison. So if you think about it, why was she doing this?
Well, the first thing comes to mind is to extract, kind of legally extract the arsenic and have this sediment of toxic.
Exactly, and obviously drain the water. So you've got all the segments of all the, the arsenic that was at the bottom of it. So you've got that in quantity. It's in quantity. And apparently, he took sick one day. He took sick. And he was lying in bed. And his wife, got permission to go in and see him. She said, "Are you all right?" As you know, "Are you all right?" And he said, "No, Mill." So he said, "I've got this bitter taste on my mouth. I've got this bitter taste." So anyway, she said, "Okay." And she went out and she bought chocolates. She bought chocolates. And she went to see him a day or so later and said, "Look, I have a chocolate. Take the bitterness." And he still got the bitterness. "Yeah, got the bitterness on my mouth." So she said, "Yeah." And he went, "Oh, this is great, this, chocolate," because they had like powdery stuff on and tasted nice and whatever. Anyway, he died. He died. Now, questions were asked by his brother Michael, and he was saying, how come this man, this woman, was going out buying flypaper? Loads were in her room, loads of it, because Alice Yap told them, and she took a few as well and said, "Look, this is what she's been doing," because they weren't sticky, because all the stickiness had gone off. And then the rat poison, because there were stacks of it down in the basement for the rats. Stacks of them. Of this rat poison. But she was buying them. Not the servants. It was her. And she was going incognito to the shops. But the shops, the shopkeepers saying, "Yeah, this is the lady who came in. This is the lady." And they wondered why she was buying so much. As one shopkeeper said, he said, I thought the house was plagued with flies and rats. And I wondered, why is she staying there? Why is the family staying there if it's plagued with rats? And that's the amount of rat poison she was buying, and also the amount of flypaper. So why all these flies? So even in the winter, when there's no flies about, she was buying it as well. And that's what you take into consideration. So what had happened was, he died. Alice Yap told about the letter as well, about this Braley fella. She was having an affair. "Oh, darling, I love you, and I'll see you next week, or I'll see you tomorrow night," or whatever was in the letter. And I'm not just saying one letter, by the way. So it was the correspondence between the two who were having an affair. It's as simple as that. And as I said before, I reiterate, for a woman from a privileged background to have an affair is scandalous. It's scandalous. It really was in those days. Not like today, but it was scandalous then. So now Michael started to investigate. And he went to the authorities. He said, "My brother was murdered. He was murdered by arsenic." And he told what was happening about all this flypaper and rat poison. So they were investigating, and they went to the shops, and they said, "Yeah." They said, "Yeah, this is what she was buying," the shopkeepers. And then they delved into how come she wanted to do this. Then they found out that she was having an affair with this Braley fella. Not only that, but she was restricted from spending money, and the threats of divorce. Now, even they turned around and said, "Well, why didn't he divorce? Why didn't he divorce her? Even his lawyer said, why didn't you divorce her? At the time he was alive. At the time he was alive. But they reckon that she had something on him. And that something is from last week. About Jack the Ripper. And James Maybrick. So I'm not fast forwarding. I'll fast forward. And what was found in the actual chimney that was bricked in when these lads was doing some repair work were diaries belonging to James Maybrick. Remember that? The diaries. And it was about the Ripper himself. It was about the Ripper himself. So did she have that on him? Did she know that he was Jack the Ripper? Is this why he didn't divorce her? In case she just turned around and went, he's Jack the Ripper. He went down every weekend with some doctor who he knew, some surgeon, down to London, to the Whitechapel area, by the way. Lived in the Whitechapel area, he had a little flat, and so did this surgeon, on the opposite corners of each other. And when they just went in like that, he went in. Hang on, let's get this right. He lived in, this is hard, this for me. He lived in one corner, and the other fellow lived in the other. Whitechapel was right in the middle. So it was easy to go and get these prostitutes, but I mentioned that last week. And I'm not going to go over it. But they only wanted one person, and that one person was Mary Kelly. Because she was going to blackmail him, and he couldn't have the scandal. How hypocritical. He didn't want the scandal of this. Anyway, that's what she knew about him.
That ties in with the, as you're saying, about the divorce.
Yes.
The scandal of the divorce, the focus of the divorce on this leading member of society. And there's always the danger in your paranoia that someone's going to ask you the question, where were you on this weekend and that weekend and that weekend?
Exactly.
There's all that.
Exactly. 100%. Exactly. It's as simple as that. So she was brought in for questioning. And obviously, she was going to deny it. She said, I haven't done this. But they brought the evidence out. The police themselves. They said, well, what about the flypaper? Why was you buying flypaper? She said, because I didn't like flies. Well, why so much? Because I didn't like flies. This is what she was saying. Also, what about all the rat poison? I don't like rats. No one likes rats. No one likes flies. I hate flies myself, and I certainly don't like rats. Terrify me, them things. So what has happened? He said, no, this is not good enough. Your excuse is not good enough. Now, don't forget what you've got to look at. This was a male-dominated society. She was a fallen woman. She was a scarlet woman. She was no better than the ladies of the night. She was no better. She was deemed as one of these. He was having an extramarital affair with a fellow countryman named Albert Braley. So what had happened was, he charged her. He charged her with murder, with James Maybrick. He charged her. And what had happened was, she was found guilty. Even the judge. Now, I've never trusted judges. I don't mean, a judge The judge always seemed to me there was no fair judges. I'm not saying there's no fair judges today, but judges always slanted towards the prosecution. They always slanted towards the prosecution because they seen someone in the dock, and the thought was there's no smoke without fire.
Yeah.
Whoever's standing in the dock, they didn't see them as innocent or guilty. They didn't see them. They just seen them as being guilty, standing in the dock. And so did the jury, because the judge, 2 days, he was summing up the case for 2 solid days, but it was always slanting towards. It was always slanting towards the prosecution. So by the time the jury filed out to consider their verdict, came back, and obviously the clerk of the court stood up and said, how do you find the prisoner guilty or not guilty of the willful murder of James Maybrick, Esquire? And their verdict was guilty. So the orderly, he went next to the judge, got out the black thing, put it over his wig, the black silk handkerchief, as he said, and he pronounced the verdict of death. You shall be taken from here to a place of execution where you shall be hanged by the neck until you are dead. May God have mercy upon your soul. Take her down. So she was led down to the cells in St. George's Hall. St. George's Hall. Right here. Right here. I'll try and get out the way. I'll try and get out the way and show you. This is like Florence Maybrick was actually where I'm sitting here now. Yeah. She was standing right there, yeah, looking over at the judge.
You know what?
And that's the way it exactly was. That's the way
walked those steps.
Yeah.
Where she would have walked down.
Yeah, she would have gone down to the holding cell.
In 2009, 2010, whatever. And it is petrifying nowadays, with no trial going on, nothing, to walk up those steps and then you're faced with this circus all around you.
If you think about it, where the holding cell is, now as they've gone out to consider their verdict, you're sitting in the holding cell. And then there's a shout down, you've reached the verdict, then you're led up them steps. Now, if you could imagine being Florence Maybrick and walking up the steps and sitting down here where I am, looking over at the judge. Now, here, I'm going, I can't get it. I can't get my bearings. Here, this is where the jury sat. This is where the jury sat. Because right there, hang on, right there is the witness box. Right there, where I am there. That was the witness box. This is where the prosecution sat, just in front of the accused. And when I brought people in there, I've shown them how it was set out. And it's all favoured the prosecution, because the prosecution who was sitting, where am I? The prosecution who was sitting here, and where where am I? And where the witnesses went into the witness box, there, and there's the jury, right there. The prosecution just got at them. The prosecution got at them. And if you could imagine the prosecution saying to Alice Yap, did you see her? Did you see that letter? Yes, tell us about it. Tell us now. Who was it to? And all this. It was to Albert Braley. She was having an affair with. Did you see the fly paper in the bowl of water extracting the poison, the arsenic? Did you see that? Yes, I did. I walked in one day. She wasn't in. And I seen this bowl full of water, but lots of other fly paper. And it was at the bottom, all the segments of the arsenic was at the bottom of it. And the prosecution had a field day. They just turned it down, emptied the water, she got all it. And she laced the chocolates.
Yeah.
She laced the chocolates with arsenic. And James Maybrick, her husband, died from arsenic poisoning. And this is what he was saying. This is how he got it. So if you could imagine walking up from the holding cell, making a stand, and being found guilty, and the judge saying to her, you shall be brought from here to a place of execution where you shall be hanged by the neck until you are dead. And may God have mercy upon your soul. Take it down. And then just, up and down into that bang. You could hear it. You could hear the cell door banging and the key locking. And it was a very dark, dim holding cell with one little gaslight. Just one little gaslight and a little flame. Dank, dark, a horrible green colour, a very dark green colour. It was horrible. So you can imagine what she was going through. She was going mad. So what has happened? She went and she wasn't hanged, as we all know now. She wasn't hanged. Now, why wasn't she hanged? And why was it was the first in the annals of history. And here's where the government comes into it. Here's where the American government come into it. And the hold they have on people. Because they said to our government, there's no way that you're going to execute an American citizen. And this doesn't come out when you read up on certain things. The American government said, do not execute an American citizen. So she was, her death sentence was commuted to life in prison. Now everybody knows that you don't do life here. Not now anyway. Well, you do now, because it's changed. Life can mean life where you'll spend the rest of your life in jail without getting out. And we know a few people who's doing that now, especially that fella who killed that young girl, Olivia Cabal.
Oh, yeah.
Right, so he'll never get out, that man. He'll never, ever get out. He'll die in jail. So this is what it's all about, but going back then, the American government said, no way. But anyway, she was finally released. And she was more or less deported back to America, albeit that she became a British citizen, because back in the day, you had to give up your American citizenship if you're marrying an Englishman and staying here.
Yeah, I've heard that, yeah. So she
go on.
Like 14 years, wasn't it, Frank, or something like that?
Yeah. And she went back to America. She was penniless. And she wrote a book. She lived as a recluse. She lived as a recluse, and that reclusiveness, she had all these cats. She had loads of cats, hundreds of them. So she lived isolated somewhere.
Yeah.
And she made one appearance, actually, to Liverpool. She'd written a book or something, and, people helped her. So she made a return to Liverpool, and she actually went to the 1928 Anthony Grand National.
Wow.
She went to the Grand National. So this was Florence Maybrick. Unfortunately, she never ever seen her kids, because her kids said that she killed their father. She killed their father. She murdered my dad. And they loved the dad. Obviously, Michael has a big influence as well. That's Michael Maybrick. He has a big influence on their upbringing as well. And she died in 1941. She died in 1941.
Wow.
As a recluse. Now the point is, do you agree with the verdict of being found guilty? Or wasn't she guilty? In your opinion, was she guilty? Not guilty? I'd like you to comment. Not only that, but do you think that the American government, like they do today, should get involved with American citizens like they do today? Because remember, they said if anyone owns an American citizen or whatever,
yeah,
they would be there. They'd cause a war for all. They would cause a war if any American citizens are there.
And that kind of patriotic guardianship still applies today.
Yeah.
But you've kind of painted the picture there of a kind of a most unfair trial, because that was the times. Chauvinistic, male-dominated society. This is a woman who's immediately wrong in the eyes of the jury, because she's this so-called painted lady, the Scarlet Lady, who dared have an affair, even though her husband's had whatever.
Numerous affairs. He had 5 children to one of his mistresses. But
yeah. And then you've got a drug addict who is slowly killing himself by taking the poison of his choice, which was arsenic. So I don't think a modern day court would find it. No. Whether or not there'd be more to come out or whatever. And
see what the prosecution went on, Anthony, was the amount of flypaper she bought, and why was she extracting the arsenic out of it into a bowl? Why did she buy so much amount of rat poison? And this is what the prosecution was going on about. And they went to shopkeepers and saying, was she buying this amount? Yeah, she was always in, buying all this stuff off us. And as one fella said, well, I wondered why she was living in a house, or the family was living in a house with so many rats and so many flies plaguing the household. Why were they living there? Why didn't they move? You see, so well, you've got to ask yourself that. Why didn't she send the servants out for this stuff? Because she kept it.
If there's so many independent witnesses, you can't argue with that, really. But the first thing that comes to mind is going back to your wonderful summing up of the gunpowder plot, where the prosecution really was the case, and this one sounds the same.
Very much the same.
all this rat poison? What was it? All this rat poison, or was it a bag for a genuine rat that you've got in the house? Does that? Because again, you've got the wealth and status thing, you know.
Yeah.
So the family, the surviving brother, well, there's two brothers, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Then they're not going to lose this case. The judge is already said, summing up, the victim is a member of establishment and a worthy man, and we should all applaud him, even though we know what's going on in the background. And she's the Scarlet Lady. It's no competition, is it?
No, it's no competition whatsoever, because you've got a judge who sums up for 2 solid days, and it's all about Florence Maybrick.
Yeah.
It's all about her. Now, don't forget what else came out. It was, the lavish lifestyle she was leading, and unfortunately, that stopped. He stopped that.
Yeah.
But what about the thing that she knew about him being Jack the Ripper? Now, remember last week when I showed us a gold fob watch with those names written inside?
Yeah.
Those names belonging to James Maybrick.
Yeah.
You had the diaries. Again, the diaries were deemed forgeries. But why brick them up in how were they forgeries when they were bricked up? He was going to... It's absolutely ridiculous. But anyway, and again, they were carbon copied, and it was from the date.
Yeah.
Now, as I explained last week about the Jack the Ripper, it's about the economy. Nothing. There's so many. Even, do you know who was one of the suspects of being Jack the Ripper? I'm going to surprise you there. Who was one of the suspects? Was Sir Arthur Conan Doyle.
Wow.
Sherlock Holmes fame.
Yeah, because he's
Reading
about that side of life, and the artist Walter Sickard,
yeah. Well, he lived over the water. He was an American, yeah. He came up to Liverpool, but he lived over the water.
But there's one interesting piece I read, and I do not want to interfere with the scenario you painted.
No, it's what it's all about.
One of the things that could have had some bearing on this case is the interference of the brother, Michael. Who was reportedly despised her.
Yeah, he did.
Michael was a homosexual in a time of extravagance, and he was kind of aware of their status as well, really. No one messes with us, don't you know who we are, that kind of thing. Now, I've not delved in, but...
Do you think that... I'm glad you came up with that, because Florence Maybrick did have things on the family.
Yeah.
One of them was the accusations of James being the actual Ripper down in London.
Yeah.
Because some of her notes or whatever she wrote, whether they were little journals, they were destroyed because she wondered why at the times of the murders, the Ripper murders, James was always down in London. James was always in London that weekend. And he stayed at home during the month of October when there was no murders.
Yeah.
And the final murder, in the November the 8th, in the Whitechapel area of Mary Kelly, he never went back down to London after that. And the only time he did go down was midweek to do business for his, his cotton thing, whatever it was.
Yeah.
Or going to the bank.
Yeah.
Whatever it was. And that was just a midweek, run down there and back again. But not the full weekend. So you've got to take that into consideration as well.
Absolutely.
Now, as you know about homosexuality then, and even in the 60s, you could go to jail and get beaten up if you were found to be an homosexual. And that's here in this country.
Yeah.
That's here in this country. So you can imagine if she knew with these journals as well, that he was having affairs with young men, or, if you know what I mean. I'm talking about Michael, that is.
Yeah.
So she could have had something on him. And he was terrified in case he came out and said.
Yeah. But it goes back to what you've always said about this status thing. They live in this bubble of being untouchable.
Oh, yeah.
And they don't want the scandal. They don't want the court case. They don't want the papers. They don't want the diaries. They don't want your account, my account, anything going out, because it dents what they've got. They don't want to lose what they've got. And I know, and I kind of think that definitely something is not right in that house, Maybrick house. And when she was found guilty, there was a lot of every page in the book was pointing the finger at her, Of course. It's like
anything else. It's like anything else. As I said, I've done so many murder cases now that, people have been hanged when they haven't done it. And the police knew the likes of that. Their Barber. He knew the likes of George Kelly was innocent of the crime.
Yeah.
Those two lads, Burns and Devlin, he knew that they were innocent of the crime, yet they were hanged simply because he wanted them out the way.
Yeah.
He wanted them out the way. So the police, then could have a big say in anything. And so did judges. You've only got to look at Christmas Humphreys, who was the prosecutor against Timothy. Timothy Evans, for murdering his child and his wife.
Yeah.
And when they found out that it wasn't him, that it was Reginald Christie, and he confessed to the thing, and he said, no, I still believe that he did it. I still believe, because they don't want to admit mistakes. Yeah. Police never admit mistakes, even today. They don't admit mistakes if they've got the wrong person. They're all right getting all the glory for catching the proper villains.
Yeah.
But
it's like you say, it's a weird thing, and it's almost like at various times justice can be bought like an expensive suit on a tailor's rack. And in more modern times, it's alarming really when you hear the stories of people who have been imprisoned and once upon a time may have been hung, who are released on appeal only to be the subject of continued investigation. And I'm thinking of one particular case, and we won't go into on there, but we'll talk privately, but where a gentleman was imprisoned for the murder and freed after 8 years. And when the police were asked who is looking for now, he said, we're not looking for anyone else because we think we've got him. We didn't let him go. And the journalists and all the media who were in the beginning, as they were in Jack the Ripper and as they go, have all backed off because they're threatened with a wad of money that says, if you mention my client's name, we will sue you for millions.
Yeah.
So
Sorry, go on. It's like this fella. He wrote a book about. This surgeon. He wrote it, and he was about to get it published, and it got to the ears of this fella's family, and they were all top, in the medical profession. They said, if that gets published and our name comes into it, we'll sue you for everything you've got, and we'll ruin you. So he couldn't take the chance. So that fella had actually wrote about this particular surgeon, who was a mate, a good friend, up at the Masonic Arms on Hope Street having a bevy. And, there was a couple of murders here.
Yeah.
That more or less, they were exact copies of the Whitechapel murders.
Wow.
So therefore, he couldn't mention it. He had to redact the name. But this book was, full of James Maybrick, and why he went after this Mary Kelly was incredible. He even brought James Kelly in, who incidentally murdered his wife and child to be with Mary, but he got caught.
Yeah.
And he went to Broadmoor, but he escaped from Broadmoor. He escaped, and he was found in Hyde Park, lying on a bench. Years later, he spent years in Broadmoor, and he escaped around 1933, 34. And he was found lying on a bench, and his copper went up to him, just an ordinary PC, and went, what are you doing here? And he said he was Jack the Ripper. He said, you can bring me back.
Wow.
He said, I've got something to tell you. This is James Kelly. He said, because I went after Mary, she ruined me. She ruined me. So we went after her. So there's lots of interesting facts about certain people who could easily be Jack the Ripper.
Yeah.
There was a fella named, he was a Russian, Sokovich or something mad it was.
Yeah.
And his son, he got him in St. Mary, forget the name of the hospital he got him into. His son, he was a Russian. And he actually came over from, I don't know whether it was St. Petersburg or Moscow, I'm not quite sure. But he came over because he was in the field of syphilis and things like that, venereal diseases.
Yeah.
And the young prince, he was suffering from it. He was suffering from, a venereal disease, and he came over to treat him. And he was one of the favourites of Queen Victoria, grandsons, favourite. He loved him. Was it William? Not quite so sure now. And he was, he got his son, what hospital was it? Anyway, he got him in there, and the son was made up, but he was with this young lad. He was in the medical profession. They were became junior doctors, were learning their profession. What's the name of it? It just came to me there. Anyway, this young lad was Jewish. And he stayed with, they were rooming together. And he died. The son died. And he went to the young Jewish lads, and he said, the young Jewish lads said, well, he used to go out for a good time. And he always went to see this particular prostitute. He said, do you know her name? He said, yeah, because he was a shy person. And, you know, because she was young, he felt more acquainted with her rather than older ones.
Yeah.
And she seemed a nice person and clean and everything else. And her name was Mary Kelly.
Yeah.
So this, what was his name? Anyway, he went looking for her. And he was asking about, you know, where's Mary? You know, going around, where's Mary? And he started killing these other people. You know, 4 other girls who befriended Mary Kelly until he got to Mary Kelly. And he actually dressed up as a woman to get into where Mary was living. So he got in there, murdered her, and set fire. Then he just took all of the, you know, the women's clothing off, because don't forget they were wide and everything, women's clothing then, Victorian. But he just had a suit on underneath, and he just took it all off, burnt it, because there was clothing, women's clothing found in the fire grate. There was women's clothing, and that hardly ever came out. So therefore, you know, he became a great suspect as well. And he was sent back. Because he couldn't afford to, like, say, hey, you're Jack the Ripper or whatever. He couldn't afford that. So he was devastated by the death of his son, because his wife, who he loved, whatever, he never ever remarried. She died after giving birth to him. So he brought him up, and it was his only child, but he died. So we went after the culprit, you know, especially when the young lad said about this going out with this girl.
Yeah.
So, you know, you can have suspects, and they've got great motives behind them.
Yeah.
They've got great motives behind them to kill Mary Kelly, but kill anyone who stands in the way.
Yeah.
And he just went back then to Russia.
Yeah.
Because they didn't want to, he would have just come out and said, well, I'm here to treat, what was his name? Prince. He reckoned that he was a suspect as well. But he was treating them. And if that would have come out, that would have been scandalous as well. You know, the royal family and venereal disease.
Yeah.
You see what I mean? So there's lots to it. There's really lots of suspects.
Yeah, you see, the dimension in a lot of cases, and certainly later ones, and the one I read relating to, it's an it's a film director, screenplay writer, who wrote up about Maybrick's brother, Michael. And he goes into intense detail about the Freemasons, Freemasonry, and the positioning of the bodies when they were found, and all relating to kind of a traditional book, not for our eyes, but someone can make sense of.
Yeah.
So it's as you said, and it applies to so many stories. If we knew at the time, oh yeah, it's Joe Bloggs, lived around the corner, he did it, we would not be having this debate now. People would be tuning in, reading books. The newspaper on Sunday wouldn't have a special Sunday supplement with a new angle on it.
Yeah.
And we go. And again, as you summed up wonderfully with Gerard tonight, it's like anything that wows us is like newsworthy forever. Whether it be space travel, meteorite collapse, on serial killers, or injustice, which is,
Justice has to be served one way or the other, though.
Yeah.
Someone's found murdered and whatever. Soulboy France says, I think she was not guilty, Frank. Body examined and contains only slight traces of arsenic, but not enough to be considered fatal.
So,
there's things like that. He's Googled that. Don't forget, anyone can say anything, especially on that Wikipedia. You can say it. Yeah. So, but that's the way it is. That's the way the prosecution delivered it.
Directors can put the camera over there, light up that part of the room. Don't light up anywhere else. And
Exactly.
It's like having an expert there to say, if you take a little bit of snuff, arsenic, how long would it take you to chop yourself? Well, if you took this amount every day, then you'd be gone within a year. You'd be gone within 6 months, whatever.
Yeah, but the thing is, it's like anything else. Can you become immune? Because rats become immune to that poison, They become immune to it. Yeah. So, can that happen to humans as well? You just don't know. You don't know. You don't know how strong it was then because it was a pick-me-up. And you have the likes of when Coca-Cola came out. Coca-Cola, when it first came out, there was proper coke in it.
Cocaine, yeah.
Oh, it's great, this.
Makes you feel great. I love another one.
Oh, fantastic.
The other thing of great Victorian times was whenever you're feeling a bit under the weather, was it laudanum?
Yeah.
Which was a killer, toxic. Wow, you're gone. Immediately addictive.
Yeah. Well, look at back in the 19th century. You had opium dens in this country.
Yeah.
Opium dens. They were legal, right? You had opium wars in China. Opium wars. The British involved again because we love the opium. Yeah, get it over here. You've got Samuel Taylor Coleridge. The great.
When I was in the early 20s, that had moved completely from opium dens to a tot of Aussie Whites and a glass of bitter.
Aussie Whites.
But you tried 3 of them, I tell you what. Yeah. Opium dens, I couldn't keep up with that.
Happy days. Happy days on the sheep. But, the likes of that, Samuel Taylor Coleridge, the great poet, he wrote a poem, I as a kite, he was, and he wrote a poem called Kubla Khan, and it was about a city in the sky. Oh, come on, and that was influenced by, what we call today is drugs, but it was opium. He loved the old opium dens. So, it's things like that, absolutely amazing.
Opium dens.
Have you enjoyed it tonight?
I have loved it, Frank. Yeah, I've loved it. I've learned a lot, and really enjoyed. Gerard was brilliant.
He was good, wasn't he? He's brilliant.
Sorry, the few minutes to get on.
Yeah,
but
that won't happen next week.
I won't take the space shuttle next time. I'll just get a cab straight to the door.
But the backgrounds was great, what Jason did anyway. But anyway, I just got to thank the sponsors. I've got to thank the sponsors for the show tonight because Gap Painting Services, honestly, just because of the sponsors, they're brilliant. They are absolutely brilliant. Honestly. If you're OHP, if you're an NHS worker, get them in. even if you've got your grandmother, or even if your parents or whatever, you know, your mum and she's at OAP, get them in to do it if she wants any decorate. They are the very reasonable, the fully insured, the great lads, the fully time served. And I've got a message here, hang on. Sorry about this.
I just briefly saw one flash up from Mark. And thank you, Mark, for that comment.
Just got to get this up. Right, so good, that's all sorted. Yeah, so got painting services, people. If your grandparents or anything, or if you say, like, you know, your kids is an NHS worker, just get them in. They'll do it, honestly. And if you're not one of them and you need decorating, get it done with these people. They're first class, believe you me. And so let's see what there's. Great show, Frank and Anthony, including Jason. I won't be on next week. I'm away with the family in Newcastle for a few days. See you both in 2 weeks. Night all. That's nice.
Good night, Mark, and thank you.
That's brilliant. That's brilliant. That's great. Is it right Maybrick is buried in Anfield Cemetery? Wikipedia again. Oh, stop it. Wikipedia. Yes, actually. Wikipedia. That's great, though. That's brilliant. Redbird, what's the say? Great show. Have you ever thought about becoming an historian, Frank? I think he might be good at it.
Brilliant.
Well, that's a new one. He might be good at it. But anyway, next week, I'm not going to tell you what I'm going to do. I'm not going to tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to surprise you as well. I'm going to surprise you, that's it. Right?
Okay.
What I will be doing, I'm not saying next week, but what I want to do in the very near future is a murder. And this murder is an incredible one. It really is. And it's a topsy-turvy murder. Really topsy-turvy. And it's an historical one. It's an historical one. But it's fascinating. It really is fascinating. And you will have heard what the names of the people. You'll go, oh yeah, know that name. I'll know that name as well.
Yeah.
But I'll do that murder, but that's in a few weeks' time. But next week I'll be doing something special. Big Liverpool connection. Absolutely amazing. If you agree or disagree, that's fine. That's fine. But it will be good. It really will be good. And I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, me too. Yeah.
I'm not going to tell you what it is. Because the likes of Soul Boy, you know, Wikipedia, on the Google. It's great. Oh, that's good. And Mark Kelly says, love the Coke one, Frank. Nice. Love the Coke. Then Bert says, whatever it is, Frank, it will be worth the wait. I hope to see you as well as Anthony. Of course, you'll see Anthony.
Thank you, Redbird. Yeah, me too.
Bye. And I'll be doing the, don't forget all you football fans out there, I'll be doing the pod tomorrow about Liverpool. Hope to see us all and to have a go. Comments. I'll try and read as many comments out as possible. And it's just, do you know what I never put up? And that was going on about it. Look, never put them up. There's Florence, nice looking girl actually. There's the, the police news. Look, see how the tragic and sad story of the Maybrick poison case. And there she is in the dock.
Oh, St. George's Hall.
Yeah. How about that?
Stood there with you, Frank.
You know?
Luckily, we got off. Just got paroled.
And there's Alice Yap, look, the nurse.
Yeah.
And Caroline Holbrook, that was her mother. And she became Chandler because Holbrook, her husband died. Chandler, her husband died again, second. Then she married that Baron von Roch, the German.
Why did they not? Why were they not in her part of her life when she got back to America? Was that her choice to isolate herself, or did the family just disown her?
Well, yeah. Don't forget that her children, her mother was dead by then, by the way. She inherited nothing. She was penniless. So, it was the infamy, wasn't it? No matter how you look at it, Anthony. Unfortunately, people are charged with the same brush if a member of your family does something, like an embezzler, I'm just saying not a murderer, but an embezzler, your views, say like you're the brother, they go there, I wonder if he's embezzled anything as well. He must have known about him embezzling or whatever.
Yeah.
It's whatever they've done, you're tarnished with that brush, especially murder. Albeit that they think you're complicit to a murder if he's a member of the family or she's a member of the family. So it's the notoriety of murder and a member of the family. Don't forget that she was the daughter. And she was viewed as a scarlet woman who was having extramarital affairs as well. And that's why extramarital affairs, which was no go in them days, no go, if you know what I mean. And that's the way it was. Paints
the picture.
It does paint a big picture. It's like the Scarlet Letter written by Nathaniel Hawthorne. And I'll tell you what it was based on as well. Arthur Miller's The Crucible. The Crucible.
Yeah.
The Crucible means a melting pot. And that melting pot was someone accusing some fella and this girl being a witch. So the melting pot was dragging all people into this cauldron of a melting pot. And they were all accused of being witches and warlocks and whatever. And every one of them were hanged in the Salem, 1692 Salem witch hunt. And, it was just terrible. These people hanged for nothing because they were all dragged in. Again, it's gossip. It's notoriety. It's evil, about witches. You've only got to look at Matthew Hopkins, the witch finder general. He was just going around and he was making a lot of money saying, "You're a witch." No, I'm not. Yes, you are. Come on. And, hanging them or burning them at a stake. And that's the way it is. You could be torn. If I was the son of a witch, for example, back in the day, I'd be executed because they know that I'm born of a witch, so there must be evilness in me. And that's the way it was. That's the way it was. Especially if you own a black cat. Only I said have a black cat. Oh, you were on the ducking stool, or worse still, you put up on a stake. That's the way it was.
Yeah.
Back in the day. I'm always saying back in the day. As Redbird said, become a historian, you would be good at. But I'll be doing a cracker next week. I'm going to keep you all on your toes. Because you don't want to miss this one. I'm not telling you what it is. How about that, Anthony? Have you enjoyed it?
Sounds like a plan. That sounds great.
Like it. And JK says, top show, bros. You never walk alone. I'll hop on tomorrow's football show as well, Frank. Yes, do that, JK.
Thank you.
So anyway, people, without you, there'd be no Frank Carlyle Show. Without the likes of this wonderful man, Anthony Brown, there certainly wouldn't be a Frank Carlyle Show, not with special guests anyway. And a big thank you to Gerard Gilligan, who'll be on. Gilligan, not Gilligan. Yeah. Gilligan. It's like Gilligan's Island, isn't it? But yeah. Talking about space. What's a Spock do that? He did that. He used to do that, didn't he? He used to do that. Peace. Spock.
Oh, Mork and Oak.
Thank you, Anthony. And I'll see you next week.
Thank you, Jason.
Thank you
guys.
Thank you so much, Jason. Love to there. Lainey, okay?
I'll tell her. Yeah, thanks, Frank.
Cheers, guys. See you next week.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye. Thanks, everyone. Just for me to say thank you so much. I hope to see you all tomorrow. I know Anthony will be looking in as well, because he's a big red. Anthony's a big red. And he'll be tuning in. I'll see you all tomorrow. Thank you so much. If not, I'll see you all next Monday. Thank you so much. Bye now.